frequency conspiracy an integral part of his repertoire, and I'm glad we could finally get into a full show about this kind of stuff. I know several other shows have tried to play gotcha with Leonard and have had him on only to blast his work. I'm sure a lot of people might be familiar with Penn and Teller's bullshit. They actually tried to pull a fast one on him. So I get the reluctance. I get the cautiousness. He doesn't do a whole lot of interviews, as I understand it, and I largely stayed out of the way for this one. But there's a ton of good nuggets throughout. It's a topic that branches into a lot of spiritual areas that I wasn't really aware of and becomes one big ball of manipulation that takes a lot of re-education into the true nature of reality, and the good doctor does a good job of breaking that all down for us. And I won't waste any more time. I know people have been writing me and waiting for a show on the 440 Hertz conspiracy, and that is what got this show rolling. So let's do it to it. We're getting into spirit sciences, weaponized sound, Rockefeller manipulation, the true nature of reality, and our essence as spiritual beings in a world of love and light and sugar and spice and everything nice and all that good stuff. With a real legend in this area, Dr. Leonard Horowitz. Boom. Alright people, we have examined the conspiratorial cornucopia of crimes by the shadowy elite and their multifaceted, well-oiled attack on everything and everyone, with nearly every aspect of life tweaked, twisted, and thoroughly tested to see how it can be used against the herd. They've weaponized education, entertainment, the justice system, economics, medicine, energy, food, water, and air. Why should sound be any different? And that is the theme of the day, the weaponization of sound and frequency and the suppression of its positive aspects and applications. And my guest is the number one stunner on the subject. His name is Dr. Leonard Horowitz, and he is an internationally known authority in behavioral science, public health, emerging disease, and natural healing, a graduate of Harvard University, a filmmaker, and author of over 15 books. Many people consider him one of the most credentialed and accomplished critics of the pharmaceutical cartel, and as a proponent of natural healing, Dr. Horowitz has been honored as a world-leading intellectual by officials of the World Organization of Natural Medicine for his revelations in musical mathematics that are impacting the fields of metaphysics, creative consciousness, sacred geometry, and many other areas. We've been waiting for this one for a long time, so why stall any longer? Dr. Horowitz, welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you very much, Greg. Pleasure to join you.
Yeah, this is quite a treat. Thanks for being here. I don't really know anyone who would be better to talk to us about this subject. It's come up here and there on the show, and we really haven't gone too deep into this aspect, although we are familiar with many other crimes in the Rockefeller network. So to kick this off, can you kind of give us a bit of history here in this area of militarized music and weaponized frequency? Where'd this all start?
Wow, that's a great start. Let's start to go into the metaphysics of it. You know, if you're going to control populations, what are you going to do most? Recognizing that it's not against flesh and blood with whom we do battle. It is spirituality. You're a spiritual being. You're not just a physical being. And so if you're going to control populations that are spiritual beings, you've got to consider the spiritual, and spirit is energy, and energy is frequency. So it's really pretty simple. You're vibrating. In fact, I'll give you the best definition of who you are, and then let's get into the history of the manipulation of who you are. So the best definition of who you are, based on the science, as well as integrating, of course, the metaphysics, you are a digital, bioholographic precipitation, crystallization, miraculous manifestation of divine frequency vibration coming out of water. So let me give you that again. You're a digital. That's mathematical. A bioholographic. Most people know what a hologram is. Your biology is a hologram. Mm-hmm. It's manifesting in this particular level of reality. There's various dimensions, and we're in one when we're in the physical realm. So you're a digital bioholographic precipitation, like a little nidus of H2O, a little water molecules sitting in a cloud, and suddenly it starts to bring on its brothers and sisters and combines and starts to get heavier, and it then drops in a raindrop from the sky. That's a precipitation. You're like that. You're a precipitation, a bioholographic precipitation, crystallization. Now, everything in your body, from the water to the proteins, it's all crystals. Water is a liquid crystal. superconductor of sound and light. And it's 80% about approximately of your body weight. And precipitation, it's kind of like how it's coming together. Little tiny pieces of sound and light come together, manifesting miraculously your physical structure out of the water. So again, your digital bioholographic precipitation, crystallization, and likewise your proteins. And again, getting back to the physical basics of who you are, you're approximately 80% ocean water and 20% lava rock. all the minerals come from lava rock. So basically, that's Mother Earth giving rise to the physical matter in which we're composed. And so you're basically a precipitation, crystallization, miraculous manifestation of that divine frequency vibration coming out of water. Now, go back to the Bible, and I know a lot of people say, I don't like the Bible. Well, again, when you study the Bible from the perspective of physics and metaphysics, and you start to look at the mathematics, then basically the information that we're talking about, my introduction came from a Bible code in 1996 that was decoded, actually in 97, decoded, according to Dr. Joseph Paleo. This was in the book I published. That was the first 6 chapters were Dr. Paleo's story of how Jesus and an angel purportedly came to him in a somewhat of a waking dream, where in the book of Numbers, chapter 7, verses 12 through 83, you don't need a computer to see it. There's the verse numbers of the Bible that contain the original musical scale. The original solfeggio musical scale. Joseph Paleo was looking for that because it was, excuse me for that. Okay, so you go back into Dr. Paleo's research and findings, and the book Healing Codes for the Biological Apocalypse goes into the rediscovery of the original solfeggio musical scale, by which the most spiritually uplifting hymn of all the ages, the hymn to St. John the Baptist, that was buried along with about 150 some odd Gregorian chants by the Roman Catholic Church. Again, you're looking at going back to the fundamental thesis that we've started with, that if you're going to control populations, you're going to suppress them spiritually, musically, mathematically. And that's what the whole Gregorian chants, that's why music is so totally, fundamentally, vitally important to our health and well-being and everything that is going on the planet. Ultimately, even obviously the entertainment industry, music plays such a tremendous role. Fundamentally, we are the music. We're made of the music. We're spiritual beings. And so if you're going to control the masses, you're going to control the music. And so that was really Dr. Paleo's initial discovery, and he brought the information to me. He felt that I was divinely guided to be with him and to work with him, and I can appreciate that now more than ever. And so the fundamental, you go back into the Bible in the beginning, Genesis 1:1. You've got the Creator and you've got the water. So 80% of your body weight is liquid God, according to the Bible. You're literally in the beginning, you've got the Creator, you got the water, and then in Genesis 1:2, you have the introduction to the Holy Spirit. It says that the Holy Spirit of the Creator hovered over the face of the water and divided the water from the water. Now you're entering into the quantum field. You try to separate H2O, water from the water, the molecular water, and you're entering into the quantum field, into which the words are sound. Sound is frequency vibration. That's electrons resonating, mediated via water, hydrated atmosphere. In fact, the scientists have studied the entire universe and found water everywhere, totally consistent with the book of Genesis. So you have rocks on Mars that have water. You have crystals in space, liquid crystals that have been filmed in deep space. where water is certainly everywhere. So now you have consistently now in Genesis 1:2, you have the words, let there be light, spoken into the quantum field between the water molecules, and out pops the sun. Now, what is the sun? The sun is 100% hydrogen, H2O, the chemistry of water, the chemistry of God, the chemistry of the universe is H plus OH minus equals H2O. And that chemistry, if you know and understand it, you'll never have any disease. You could eliminate all diseases from planet Earth, and I can go into that with you. We should probably talk a little bit about that. But basically, still as an introduction, if you understand that the sun now pops out of the frequency vibration resonance of let there be light, the spoken word, sound, music, and now you've got an energy resonant frequency that's popping out 100% hydrogen. If you look at the science of it, the sunshine, the sun itself is 98% hydrogen and 2% helium, which is double hydrogen, two hydrogen atoms stuck together. That's helium. So 100% hydrogen. And what's it doing? Well, it's generating light. Well, what's light? Light is, as I just mentioned, electrons radiating from that sunshine that gives us the rainbow. It gives us the electromagnetic color spectrum, the visible light spectrum. And what's at the heart of that? Greenish yellow. You look at a rainbow, it's greenish yellow. What color is that? That's 528 nanometers. And our thesis, based on all the evidence, again, you're looking at sound creates light. That is the truth. It's not just the truth in Judeo-Christendom. It's also basically all of the aboriginals, the natives, all say the same thing, that the sound is the source. And so you now have our theory based on a lot of evidence, and you can read the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love, to really get into depth on the science and the physics and the mathematics and the sacred geometrics of why the water molecule is this sacred geometry of a tetrahedron structure, and how because of the polarity H2O, you've got H plus OH minus equals H2O. So you've got the positive and negative charge within it and the electron that moves onto the oxygen in that chemistry. Well, that creates a polarity whereby the two molecules, the two H2Os, like a brother and sister, a male and female, come together, and because of the polarity, they literally form the Star of David, the sacred geometry of Solomon's seal. So again, that now, of course, you get into the garbage on the reality of the Star of David being a sign of Judaism today, and it's being, of course, degraded by all those that wish to be anti-Semitic and be neo-Nazis and be anti-Zionists, and it's a symbol that has been distorted. The fundamental reality is it's what you're really fundamentally made of, water. And so you're looking now at the sunshine that is delivering this light, and then you go into, and we'll have to talk about this at some point, the botanical world, how it reflects this heart of sunshine. Chlorophyll is what's producing oxygen. This world is being depleted of oxygen. People who are diseased, they get disease because their bodies, their chemistry become acidified. There's your H plus. H plus and the OH minus, that little electron, that minus charge, is what's coming off of the sun. It's coming off of my voice right now. It's the energy that's generating all matter to move. Everything in the universe moves because of what's called piezoelectric. It's all energetic. Electromagnetic literally means electro, that's electrons. And because of the polarity, positive, negative charges inherent in the basic physics and the chemistry of it, it is literally now moving, shifting, being forced to move one way or another. That's what is basically involved in everything universally. So you see what we're breathing. And this comes again in relevance to solving some of the greatest urgencies that we've ever witnessed on this planet. I have up on our Revolution television channel on Vimeo. If you go to vimeo.com/forward Revolution television, you'll get to Sherry Kane and my television channel. And you'll see there's one about 20-minute program that is called Natural Cure for Global Warming. And it deals with what we're talking about. It deals with the fundamental understanding of the chemistry of water, the electron resonant and creative spirituality of manifestation of matter. And then it also deals with disease, because again, if you look at all diseases, all chronic diseases, they're all caused by acidification and hypoxia. Low oxygen and hyperacidity in the body chemistry causes disease. So we are like the universe. We are like, we reflect the universe. We're certainly reflecting our Earth, our Mother Earth, which basically is being acidified. You have acid rain, you have destruction, you have various species now becoming extinct because the fundamental chemistry is being poisoned. And so you look at, the major lifestyle illnesses, which this topic relates to, and we can solve all the world's problems if we simply grasp what we're talking about here. The fundamentals of music, the fundamentals of spirituality, and how the chemistry of it all pulls it all together. And if we maintain the balance, we maintain the harmony, we put out the good frequency, vibration, resonance, we can tremendously impact every aspect of this planet that we feel needs to be changed. And so you look at lifestyle risks: caffeine, acidifying; nicotine, acidifying; sugar, refined carbohydrates, acidifying; all pharmaceuticals, lots of red meat, lots of red meat, acidifying; stress, acidifying. So you have caffeine, nicotine, sugar, stress, alcohol. I forgot that one. Alcohol, lots of red meat, and they're all acidifying. And then you look at the chemistry of polluting our planet with the non-renewable resources, which is insane. I mean, literally, we're dealing with psychopaths who are running this planet. And so, you've created an acidified condition that, again, reflects this fundamental H plus OH minus equals H2O. So you've got what we're breathing, what we're living off of, what's manifesting us every nano instant. If you're a digital bioholographic precipitation, crystallization, miraculous manifestation of divine frequency vibrations coming out of water, you are literally being recreated every nano instant. The sound and light signaling is coming in and remanifesting you, and the only thing that's keeping you from being superhuman is your dumbed down, mind-controlled mind. You're basically, the minds of psychopaths through the media have manipulated us to turn down the volume of the music of divinity and harmony and turn up the music of dissonance. And we think we're in fear. We're not in faith. Every minute of your life should be a test of faith, but it's not, because we're oriented to being engaged in this critical, this fear-based modus operandi that is the human ego. And it's been engineered as such. And so you've got, through the music and through the media, you've got a reduction of what it is that really sustains us, uplifts us, and heals us miraculously, remanifests us at will. If we literally realign in full faith and harmony and use prayer, which is literally the frequency resonance of your labia ratum, your lips, the labia ratum, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. That's the original solfeggio. It was actually ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. The la is the labia ratum. The female labia give birth to a baby. Our spoken words and our prayer gives forth reality. it generates our reality. And so if you understand that concept, again, you go back and look at what's taking place, the oxygen that we're breathing, the ha, the breath of life, the prana, is sourcing from two things. One is chlorophyll, green grass, green leaves, the botanical world. Why did it select that color? Because it's at the heart of the rainbow. That means it's at the heart of sunshine. That means it's at the heart of hydrogen, radiation, in the heart of the sun. And as above, so below. We're little holograms, you and I, of the massive reality. So as above, so below. If it's true for the rainbow, if it's true for sunshine, if it's true for the sun, that's true for our hearts too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, we're vibrating at that frequency resonance. And so that's, in my opinion, based on all the evidence, that's the resonant energy of love. That's pure tone love, reflecting pure light of love. That's 528 at its heart. And the only other thing that gives us oxygen, that sustains us, is this water. You go to the ocean and you see the waves are pumping out what's within the water, oxygen. And so this is what's literally keeping us and sustaining us and our planet. And it's the simplest understanding that has been suppressed so that we could be manipulated by the mind-controlling media and the corporate media and those that have literally monopolized illegally everything from energy and the Tesla technologies to the cures like oxysilver for various diseases. Literally, oxysilver, I don't know if you know about it, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I actually have been taking colloidal silver to see how I feel, and I do feel a little bit better than usual, but honestly, I've been taking a lot of vitamins, exercising, and eating a bit better, so it's tough to know exactly what I should be giving the most credit to, and I do appreciate all this backstory and re-education, though I do want to get more into the sound aspect soon, but tell us a little bit about colloidal silver real quick if you'd like. What does it do for us?
Well, particularly the oxysilver, what you mentioned, and by the way, the answer to your question is that everything that you're doing is helping. When you are exercising, you're aerobic, you're bringing back in that oxygen. Now, think about the best way, easiest way to understand what I'm talking about is you've had a muscle spasm called a Charlie horse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you see like athletes get them on the field. That's why they're taking, the mineral drinks for rehydrating and remineralizing their bodies, because to have muscles that are basically going into spasm, and by the way, table salt is poison. You have sea salt. That's not poisonous. Sea salt is what we're made of, ocean water. But you take table salt and it blows out the chemistry and the charges along the membranes. It imbalances the magnesium, the potassium, the sodium potassium pump gets poisoned, and your nerves don't function. So your muscles go into spasm. And so what you see on an athletic field, you see a sports physiologist or a therapist go out into the field and they massage the muscle of the athlete that's down, and what they're massaging away is what's called lactic acid. Acid. What's acid? H plus. What's missing? The electron. Where is it? It's on the oxygen. OH negative minus electron. So you see, there's your basic chemistry on a sports field in a muscle spasm. And again, going back to what I said before, you've got all your chronic diseases are caused by hyperacidity and reduction of oxygen. On the athlete...
So this replenishes it.
That's right. And again, when your muscle is in spasm, what's it doing? It's burning oxygen. Just like when you exercise and you're in spasm, you're breathing and hyperventilating, and you're using more and more oxygen. And so that's basically, and again, what's on the oxygen that carries the energy? It's that electron within the oxygen. And in fact, what we're breathing is oxygen that the electron and electrons in it because it's produced by either the chlorophyll, greenish yellow, vibrating at the heart of sunshine, or through the ocean water, which in and of itself is the fundamental creative juice of the universe. Suddenly now, because you're breathing that electron of love, I call it, you're basically being sustained and you're going to be healed. And that's what happens on a football field or a soccer field, where you massage the muscle out, and suddenly now the athlete is, because you've massaged the lactic acid away, you've replenished the fluid and lymph in the blood around that muscle. Now the muscle has more oxygen, less acid, and it relaxes, and you can go on and play ball. So that's basically, the fundamentals of where it's at. Now, going back to the original question.
Right.
How and why did we get to where we're at? How did we get A440 standard tuning? Well, back in the 1930s, you had RCA, EMI. These were obviously very, very large multinational corporations advancing the entire field of music and frequency and military. And the Rockefellers, of course, the Rockefellers back in that time were working with I.G. Farben, the president of the largest pharmaceutical and chemical combine that has evolved into our current monopoly, our global monopoly. I call it the military, medical, petrochemical, pharmaceutical banking cartel. And that cartel, if you really look at in modern era, where it really sourced and became extremely empowered, was in pre-Nazi Germany. The corporation was called I.G. Farben, and it was made up of Hoechst, BASF, and the Bayer Aspirin Corporation, Bayer Corporation. And those companies were producing rubber, and they were, of course, other chemicals and fabrics and colors, different paints, and they were partnered with Rockefeller Standard Oil Company. And the desire back in those days was to, again, advance various military and population controlling technologies. And of course, music and frequency resonance was not going to be left out. And so they started to do research in the 1930s. And what I'm telling you now comes from Rockefeller Foundation archives, whereby they sought various frequencies that would, in a military or even public, would cause certain behavioral impact, and that they determined that if you had a certain frequency, which they did not disclose, but we can pretty much, based on what happened, we can theorize at least and have suggest a very high probability that this is what occurred. Because by 1938, the research had been advancing to develop certain frequencies to be used in war arenas that would literally cause, quote, mass hysteria, end quote, in the targeted population. Now, what they researched and learned was that if they had and used a certain frequency, they could cause 8% of the audience to begin to go into hysteria. And now, from the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love, or online at medicalveritas.org, which is our online journal, you can read what is in the book as chapter 4. It's musical cult control, whereby during Elvis Presley's era, where he was actually controlled by the colonel, he was being handled by a covert operative, and his whole life story is pretty interesting from that perspective. It's very typically neglected. But you saw the first time where prior to Elvis's age, women audiences would swoon. They would just like, oh, oh. But with Elvis, unlike Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and those guys, they would start to scream, mass hysteria and riot.
Yeah.
It was the first time at concerts where you actually had violence. And based on the evidence that we're looking at, we believe that it was a social experiment, and it was a successful social experiment for the king of rock and roll to bring in the British invasion, whereby most of this work was done. And if you look at the power centers on the planet today, it's still pretty much the same as it was back then. You have Germany and you have London. Germany and London are controllers of the Western world. The entire mindset, the music, the entertainment industry, the media, it's basically controlled out of Germany, Berlin, and out of London. And that's where, again, you've got your source of the banksters. You've got the Rothschild family, which has given rise, of course, to the Rockefeller family, and that's cartel. And, you can talk about, to some extent, infighting among them. And you can certainly talk about the illusion of there actually being separate, distinct commercial entities out there in the various banks. But they're really operating just like the oil industry is, as a cartel. They get their private meetings together, et cetera, et cetera. Well, and then determine policies and programs based on those private meetings and pricing. For example, we just had yesterday a news announcement, and it was outrageous. And you may have had a similar one where you are. We're in Hawaii, and they just announced on the news yesterday how the price of gasoline has plummeted, just unbelievable, over the last couple of weeks. But not one word as to why. Not one single word as to who's behind it, who controls OPEC, who controls the whole industry. Well, anyway, going back in the 1930s, they discovered that this specific frequency that they could use to basically, in my opinion, dumb down the planet, cause mass hysteria, cause degeneration, cause psychopathology, cause emotional distress, and physical illness. And I believe, based on the evidence, that what they found was what's called 741. Maybe they knew it before those studies. Maybe they just confirmed it. But I'm going to go into more detail about 741. It deals with what they institutionalized in 1938, based on this research. They had a hard time with the European musicians to institutionalize a degenerative, dissonant frequency for the Western world. So because they had such a difficult time convincing the fine classical musicians of Europe, and of course, that's where the source of Western music is. It's in Europe. It's in Vienna. And so you have to have a sophisticated propaganda in order to convince, a whole industry into a different mindset. And the industry had been pretty much set at A444. A444 frequency was what had been typically used. Some people were using A432, and there is a large movement today that is being directed by the global industrialists, operating through what is called the counterintelligence operatives, or covert online action. These trolls, the internet trolls that establish these blogs and that basically attempt to degrade me, Sherry Kane, people like you that go out and the truth tellers. There's always these trolls that pop up that try to degenerate and basically discredit and divide audiences, divide leaders. They infiltrate and they basically create chaos. And so that is a protection racket, and there's a protection racketeers are promoting 432. Well, I talked about 432 in the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love. It's a harmonic of 528. They go well together. And from that perspective, in my opinion, based on that and the brilliant mathematical revelations of Victor Showell, his name is, in my opinion, a beautiful recognition of who he is. He shows you well what the reality is, not the disinformation. And he tells us that 432 and 528 are basic fundamental sacred geometric frequencies that work well together. And so there's a concerted effort to discredit me and discredit 528 frequency, which basically comes out of A444. Now, this is what I'm about to tell you is hard if you're not a musician to wrap your mind around.
Okay.
And even if you are a musician, it's a little difficult, a little challenging to grasp. But fundamentally, first of all, everything in the universe is scaled. Everything in the universe is scaled. Again, because everything comes out of music, musical mathematics.
Okay.
And scaling is just like, the piano scale, which typical octave is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now, here's what's difficult. When you tune your instrument to A444, your C goes into love 528. It goes into harmony with chlorophyll. It goes into harmony with the center of sunshine. In physics, it's called phase locking, where you lock into the power at the heart of the universe. That's A444, C528. Now, what the Rockefellers were doing, and the banksters and the military industrialists and population controllers, what they discovered is that if you go down to A440, your D major chord, which is a very important chord, your D major chord, which has an F sharp in it, that goes into 741. So to give you the punchline ahead of time, I believe that what we're looking at is a war between good and evil, between good love and evil fear.
Mm-hmm.
And love is harmonizing, and fear is degenerating. And A444, C528 gives you love, harmony. And A440 with a D major chord with a F sharp in 741 gives you dissonance. And so basically what my thesis is, and based on the evidence, it's completely reasonable. You have the Rockefellers now coming into, in 1938, having the trouble that they had trying to convince the European musicians to adapt A440, F sharp 741. They had a hard time convincing them, so they had to hire a propagandist. Incredibly, they hired Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, literally the Nazi propaganda minister for the Third Reich, was solicited and basically under contract with the Rockefeller Foundation in 1938 to go into the British Standards Institute and convince them that they should adapt for the Western world's music the concert pitch standard tuning of A440 frequency. And so that's what happened. And you now had the European musicians who were up in arms, and there were many of them who were complaining, and a couple of them were writing, even in the Royal Society of the Arts, that this was horrible. And musicians actually could feel it. Like if you're really, you're turned on and you're what's called registered, like vocalists, when they're really in with the flow, and you talk to any good vocalist or any good musician who's serious as a professional, and they're in love. When they're making music, they're phase locked to love in God's heart. They communicate their hearts, like in music, in voice. Your diaphragm moves the oxygen, the ha.
Mm-hmm.
Your vocalist, your vocal cords simply just flow. The oxygen moves through the vocal cords, and you don't think. You don't have to think. All of us who think, that we don't have good voices and we're afraid to sing, we're really massively dumbed down. My theory is that originally, when we were all that we could be, we were singing. We weren't speaking to one another. We were and it's confirmed also. In fact, the original Torah was all math. It wasn't letters so much, and it was all sung. You had sung mathematics, which eventually is essentially music.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you had in the original Torah. And so you have today a gross degeneration of who we once were, and that ultimately what I'm advancing here is the theory that we could get back to where we could be as superhumans, not simply, quote, human beings who are dumbed down mind control slaves of the global industrialists. So Rockefeller is in 1938 institutionalized, and I'm not saying when I say Rockefellers, I'm also including the Rothschilds and the rest of the global industrialists.
Right.
And they decided that this was what was going to be implemented. And subsequent to that, you then had all of the major companies basically go to the British Standards Institute institutionalization of A440 standard tuning, which instantly suppressed people's hearts and instantly triggered their egocentric minds. Now, if you look at science, you have today, you have a battle ongoing socially between the gods of science and the gods of religion. You have, faith in medical deities,
right?
Medical doctors, right? And, you even have, your fundamentalist Christians, which in my opinion are grossly hypocrites, because instead of putting full faith and prayer behind their healing, they rush off to see the doctor. That's hypocrisy. It's ridiculous. It's insane, especially when you start to look at all the evidence that supports the fundamentalist understanding and the wisdom in that God gave every single one of us everything that we needed. Just like a loving parent would never send a child to school without having what's necessary to do well in school. Likewise, we have been given the lips, the labia ratum. We've been given the opportunity for speech, song, prayer. We have been given these wonderful, loving hearts, most of us. And this goes into I'll have to talk a little bit about my theory on why we have some people, such as the internet trolls, who are just degenerative. They're psychopaths, and they commit these atrocities, and they rationalize it, that they believe that they're doing good when in fact they're committing outrageous crimes.
Right.
And so, again, you're dealing with two different frequencies. You're dealing with love 528, or you're dealing with F sharp 741. Now, F sharp 741, let me just give you a little bit more background information on it.
Okay.
And this is important from my thesis, my theory, that your DNA is actually a receiver and a transmitter of light and sound signals. Now, that's not my theory. That's been proven in science already. We know that DNA is a receiver and transmitter of light and sound signals. In fact, that's about 96% of its function. 4% of its function is what the entire field of genetics and genetic engineering prays to. They call it, basically the genetic expression and the genetic sequences that they're chemically and biologically trying to impact to cure people of diseases, and that they're increasingly ascribing to genetic aberrations. It's all, in my opinion, excuse my French, bullshit. It's really outrageously insane and complete hypocrisy when you really look at what the science has already shown.
So let me ask you a quick question here.
Sure.
Just because, for I guess as long as I've been alive, I'm 29 years old. For as long as I've been alive, music has been tuned to this 440, but yet I still get a lot of enjoyment out of music, and I do feel, a positive vibe from some music. What is going on there? Is this something that's very, very subtle, or like if I changed all my music over to the proper frequency, would I notice it right away that it sounds super different? Do you need to bask in it for a while?
Thank you.
It seems like, the difference seems so subtle.
Thank you, Greg. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you bringing me back to where, your average listener is. So that, that's great. uh, if you are like I said, a professional musician who's really tuned into making music, you'll feel it almost immediately. If you're not, if you're just an average layperson listener, you won't necessarily feel it. You won't certainly hear a difference. You may start to feel a difference. Like, I'll give you a couple examples. When I first started to listen to it, actually, the first thing that happened was I play electric guitar. I play acoustic and electric, and I do some vocals. And so I had my electric guitar. I just tuned it up. You get it tune up to A440, to A444 from A440. So A440 is what Rockefeller's institutionalized. You go up 4 hertz. You go up 4 hertz, which is a lot. Let me say why it's a lot, and then I come back. You've got the understanding from a radio. You're listening to a radio, and let's say you're listening to 98.6 on your radio dial, and now somebody comes and you're grooving off your favorite tune at that frequency channel, and suddenly somebody just turns it 1/10 of 1 hertz up, and suddenly you get all static. Now, going from A440 to A444 is 40 times that static. And literally, if you listen to static long enough, it becomes so unnerving that it will kill you. It's so distressing. It'll poison your system. You'll go crazy and you'll die.
Wow.
But if you listen to something that is in music is so beautiful, so wonderful, so powerful in so many ways that if you change that aspect of it, as we're talking about, going 40 times the change of static in the music world, the average person is not going to notice a difference, but certainly over the long term, they would never notice a difference. If you're born into it, if you grew up in it, you'd never know that there was anything but that. And you would still gain enjoyment because, when you go out and enjoy music, it's usually during a time of relaxation. So you're pairing that enjoyment with other positive reinforcing factors in your behavior, in your environment. And so you're suddenly now getting entrained to that degenerative frequency, and you think, hey, this is cool.
Mm-hmm.
But the first time that I tuned my guitar to A444 and I set it down, it was still on. The strings were not playing. I walked across the room, I got to the kitchen, and all of a sudden I hear my guitar starting to play. The strings vibrating.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what the heck? I walked back across the living room, touched my strings, silenced them, then started back to the kitchen. Get to the kitchen again. All of a sudden, the damn strings are vibrating again, coming through the amplifier. I said, what the heck? And so I walked back across, and I then realized, at that point, I didn't even have the scientific understanding, but I knew something was different. Something was very different. They wouldn't do that in A440. They only did it in A444. So now later on, I learned that what was occurring was called phase locking. In physics, it's called phase locking.
It's so interesting how many different areas it comes up in. Another little thing I wanted to ask you about, before we got out of here, was a lot of people think that something like Coral Castle or even the Great Pyramids might have been made with some type of sound levitation technology. Have you investigated this application to that kind of thing before?
I haven't, because it's so obvious that that's so. It's
Right on.
it's kind of like it's like duh. What else is new? How the hell do you think you're going to lift those blocks that even today's machinery can't lift? You know,
You think there's a way to use the frequency to actually counteract gravity on massive multi-ton stones like that?
absolutely, absolutely. There's no question in my mind that that's the potential. That's what the whole field of physics really deals with in the electronics of it. Again, everything is electrons. And again, you are, as I mentioned, a crystallization of that frequency vibration. And so everything is literally can be brought into that state by frequency. The whole field of alchemy is like that. You see, alchemy is where you use resonant energy to transform gold, like lead to gold, for example. And how is that possible? Well, it's possible because what you're shifting is the number of electrons in its orbital around the atom of the certain element. How is it done? It's done through frequency radiation or frequency resonance. And so if you're capable of transforming elements, then you're certainly capable of lifting elements. You know, I don't know. Have you ever, Greg, ever had a real death or near death experience?
No, I don't think I've had a near-death experience. Though I've had some psychedelic experiences that felt like it was going to go that way, but no, not really.
Okay. Well, one of these days, maybe you should interview some folks, call for folks who have had those, and ask them what it was like. And what you'll find is the commonality. And I've had it at least a half a dozen times where actually should not even be here right now. I'm on borrowed time, believe me. And I'll give you one instance, uh, just very briefly. I was in love. I was literally being rejected by a woman who I was madly in love over. And it was a summer fling, and she went back to Bennington College up in Vermont. I think it was Vermont, New Hampshire. And she's now I'm calling her from a telephone in a telephone booth, a glass telephone booth, the older style ones, in a ghetto of New Brunswick, New Jersey, in front of the oldest church in New Jersey, in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I'm pleading my heart out to salvage the relationship. As she's not really hearing me, I see out of my eye a half a dozen gang members coming towards the booth, and I'm not really focused on them, but I'm talking with her and I'm pleading with her in love. And they get to the phone booth and they start to bang their fists on the windows. And I just smile at them and I wave at them because I'm focused on getting this relationship salvaged, right? I'm not focusing on them at all.
Hmm.
30 seconds later, suddenly, instantaneously, and this is what's common among all people who have near death or real death experiences. And it's really an indication of how much love that our Creator has for us that would put us into a state, an altered state, at the most potentially traumatic time of our lives where we have to leave the planet in death. At that potentially most painful and traumatic time, this is what happens. I just like simultaneously heard a crash, and everything became etheric and slow motion like. I saw little sparkles, like glass like sparkles, and a red, kind of like filmy haze in my mind's eye. And I then heard another slight crash, and then all of a sudden everything went back to normal time from slow motion. And I thought, what the heck was that? Now, mind you, I have on my right hand, I've got the telephone where I'm pleading love. Now, I'm in a small telephone booth. You know, you can't take one step forward, you can't take one step back. You got a
Hmm.
glass window on your left, you got a glass window on your right. Now, I look, what the heck was that? What was that red, filmy thing that I just saw? That thing, and I look to my left, and I see that the glass to my left is completely shattered, right at the level of my head.
Huh.
I go, what the heck? And I then looked, and I said, well, what was that? And I looked to my right, and the glass to my right wasn't completely out, but it was broken right at the level of my head. And I go, well, whatever came in on my left hit right here on my right. What was that? I looked down, and there's a red brick.
Wow.
Greg, I swear, there's no other reasonable explanation for what happened to me other than to conclude that I had a red brick go through my head. And I did not feel one thing.
Wow.
Everything went into slow motion. Everything went into kind of like this etheric state. And I then continued to plead in love. I went back to my apartment after this thing, and I wrote a beautiful love song. I was inspired by the moment. But again, what is the metaphysics? What would it take for something like that to actually happen? It is explained by what it is that we've been talking about. How do you levitate a 50 million ton slab of sandstone, granite, that the ancient pyramids have? How do you do that? You don't do it by a machine, a physical machine. You do it by a sound, a frequency resonance that puts you into, not, in this case, an altered state. The altered state is an altered molecular resonance, so that what gravitationally would be prohibited is somehow miraculously directed. That is the only reasonable explanation that I could come up with, that I can, based on all the evidence. So I haven't really focused on it. It's not my area of expertise. But what is of interest to me, because I have a dear interest in Levitical priesthood, and I have an interest in the biophysics, the electrogenetics, the whole manner in which we're manifested and can be restored through sound frequency resonance. I have a big interest in what the Levitical priests did in the story of, for example, where they had the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. You remember that story?
Right.
Okay. Well, if you go back to the Bible and read what happened, they said that the Levitical priests marched around in prayer around the entire city for 6 days. There's your 6 again. And on the 7th day, they had told everybody prior to this, don't say one word. Don't make any noise. On the 7th day, they brought in everyone around, and they told them to scream and cheer as they played their ram's horns. Actually, the ram's horns were played during the 6 days during the prayer. And on the 7th day, they said, everybody come in and scream, cheer, and the walls came tumbling down, all except Rahab's apartment. Rahab had been told to place out of her window a red-colored rope. And theoretically, let's just theorize, perhaps that rope acted as an electromagnetic heat sink, so that when the frequencies of resonance of sounds from the shofars, the ram's horns being played with prayer by the priests, that attenuated the frequency resonance. It's a theory. It's an interesting concept, but that's all we have at this point.
Right.
Because it's been suppressed. The technology of Tesla, the understanding of how energy is all around us, how energy can be manipulated primarily through sound, and gee whiz, suddenly now you realize we have tremendous hope and potential for this planet if we could come back to what is true, what is real about our own spirituality, the metaphysics, mathematics of our own creation. This is the fundamentals of creationism. It's not hard. It's simple. 1 and 1 is 2, unless you're a cheater, and that's what we've got running the planet. Bunch of cheaters, criminals.
Well said, man. It's a fascinating topic. It goes into so many areas we couldn't even cover. The chakra system, the sacred geometry. It's definitely a fundamental aspect to reality. And I can say I have had some psychedelic experiences that were out of body in nature, and right before that part of the experience, there's definitely a vibrational feeling. I mean, obviously you're not literally vibrating, but all I can describe it as is some type of vibration. So I definitely think that it's a fundamental aspect of life that just isn't talked about. So I really respect the work you're doing. I respect all the hard things you've had to go through. I know that the road hasn't been easy. All the disinformation agents you've dealt with. You even mentioned the movie Pharma Whores, which on top of everything you've had to deal with, Penn and Teller's bullshit on Showtime, they tried to pull one over on you too. It just never ends.
We've had some amazing things. The films, one of the things that Sherry Kane and I love to do is do film reviews. We have a series on Vimeo.com, Revolution Television, called the Hollywood Spin series. And if you watch those, you'll really get a sense of how it is that the multinational corporate media, how it controls the Hollywoodism and this whole concept of manipulating the mass mind for whatever political agenda that you've got brewing at that time, how it's being played out on the silver screen. And, we love that work. I mean, that is just so right on to what it is that we would prefer to be doing with our time, is educating the public by taking some, really fine Hollywood productions and then basically showing what's really behind them in terms of a psychological and behavioral agenda. I think that's one of the greatest services that we could render at this point, as well as promote the 528 frequency and the 528 revolution. We also recommend that people listen to this music at 528radio.com. We invested, at this point, probably $120,000 in the idea that we can take the world's music and we could transpose it into frequency 528, which is what we have now. You have the capacity to transpose your favorite music on 528records.com, and then it goes into a public library, and then it will be potentially selected to be on a playlist among one currently of 9 radio stations on the internet, that all the music's been transposed into 528. And so that's what we put up on the internet, and it's a seeding of this whole concept. And again, it's a commitment. It's the best that we could do. I just want to also just let you know, going back to the 528 versus 741 battle, I think we're always going to have evil in this universe, on this planet. I think it's time now, though, that we get a little reprieve, and it's called 1,000 years of world peace. And I think that in order to have that happen, you've got to enhance the love, you've got to enhance the 528, you've got to open people's hearts, resonant energy. And that's what the radio, 528 radio, is doing, and that's what the capability is, that more and more people who get into this and start to play music and enjoy music in this frequency, the likelihood of people opening their hearts and then being members of a community, extended family, that's going to do something beneficial to humanity, for humanity, other than just thinking selfishly. And there are those of us who are humanitarians. And, one of the challenges I've got right now is to deal with a federal court judge who doesn't realize that humanitarians, typically that develop voices, almost always get this kind of treatment. The judge thinks that this is delusional. Well, frankly, it's delusional to think that 9/11 wasn't an inside job. It's delusional.
Amen.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to be a complete mental midget in order to think that the story is that those planes blew it up and then it got so hot and then the whole thing's just crumbled into dust. It's ridiculous. The concept is just beyond ridiculous.
It is.
So, again, we're dealing with, let's say there's a quarter of us. that are humanitarians, that vibe to love, see a world that could be made into a wonderful place, sustainable living, and commercially operating to bless people, to bless animals and the botanical world, and instead of poisoning everything and degenerating everything that we've come to. So I think we're at that point where we, the minority, the 25% of us, let's say, have got to come now to the realization that this information presents. What's unprecedented about this interview, about I'm humbled to be able to deliver the message. What is unprecedented is that we've never seen in the history of humanity the communication systems available and the information available to change everything. It's paradigm shattering. I said it before. Here it is again. The information we're delivering shatters the old paradigms with hard, cold, rock, not only science, mathematics, but your own experience. It's called, in science, science of observation, it's called empirical science. You look at a blade of grass, it's greenish yellow. That's prima facie evidence. It's in your face. Why is it greenish yellow? It's greenish yellow for the reasons we talked about. It's in love. And it's appropriate that we begin to vibe to that same frequency resonance. And then we can have what it is that everybody pretty much, except for those who are psychopaths and 741 vibrators, they're into dissonance. They're into manipulation and disharmony. And that's what I think is the opportunity to change.
Well said, man. And that is really interesting about the I-528 Tunes website, because I end every show with a song of my choosing. Maybe I could get it over to you guys and we could do a conversion before, this episode goes out, and then people might be able to feel some type of difference, or at least get started on that track.
Well, I'll save you a lot of engineering, editing. Just play the original track of John Lennon's Imagine.
Okay.
Now be careful, because since it was discovered that John Lennon, and I don't know how he knew, but he went through the trouble of retuning his white piano into A444 and C528. The original Imagine is played in 528.
Wow.
Now, since we came out with it, the devil doers that controlled YouTube, Google, they actually went through their top John Lennon videos, uploads, and they transposed it. So it now doesn't harmonize with 528 like it used to. So, but if you get a hold of the original tracks and then take a 528 tuning fork, or just go online at 528records.com, there is a body tuner. We actually put up a free body tuner that you can listen to and play if you just put your mouse over your cursor over the frequency on the perfect circle of sound. It'll play that frequency. And so if you put your cursor over 528, as you open the window of the player that you're using to play the original soundtrack of Lennon, you'll be able to discern whether it is a manufactured manipulation or whether it's the original Lennon Imagine. So
nice.
Again, think about, the song was fantastic. The song Imagine the World at Peace. This is exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll look for that.
Paul McCartney also knows about this, because he actually has the bridge in Band on the Run. His Band on the Run actually shifts during the bridge into 528. So this is very interesting stuff.
Yeah, wow. Well, I'm glad I brought that up, because I'll definitely end the show with that song, and I'll try to make sure I do my damnedest to get the right version. But man, Dr. Horowitz, this has been very interesting. I've been wanting to talk about this stuff for a long time. It's still a bit over my head at some areas, but we've definitely clarified a lot. Before I let you go, would you like to remind the people again about your books and websites?
Well, thanks. Yeah, for people who want to know about 528, get the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love. The key, we believe, is a fulfillment of virtually every native as well as scriptural prophecy. It's where, we need 1,000 years of world peace. Well, the key we believe in the Judeo-Christian world is the Old and New Testament satisfies what's called the Revelation 3, 6 through 8, and the book of Revelation 3, 6 through 8, and then Isaiah 22, 22, the Old Testament, talks about a key, a musical note to the house of David. Again, the Davidian, the Star of David we talked about today on the show is that symbol, that sacred geometry of two water molecules coming together, resonating in the sound of frequencies of love that the bees play when they are buzzing. Mm-hmm. So that, and the concept of you as your organic chemistry, the whole organic chemistry molecule is the same structure. It's this carbon-6, it's a hexagonal ring. And so that's the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love, a musical note that can open doors that no man can open and close doors that no man can close. This is basically what's happening. We're evolving in it. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about a greater picture and a certain movement towards having a shifting or shattering of a paradigm of deception, illusion, and degeneration that I think it's time to change. So that's the book of 528, Prosperity Key of Love. I mentioned 528radio.com for listening. Choose one of your channels. One of the younger folks who I know are mostly younger folks listening to this broadcast would probably vibe most to 528 Monkey Man Radio on 528radio.com. Try that out. See how you like that one. There's a really great guy who's the DJ for that one. We have opportunities. We're looking for right now a Hawaiian, somebody who really enjoys Hawaiian music and knows the old music, to take Hawaiian music. Much of it is done in slack key tuning, which actually goes down to 432 or 417. But again, for the more modern Hawaiian music, and there's a lot of great Hawaiian music out there right now, then we're asking for a DJ who would have the opportunity will fund it to produce their own radio show. And then we would like to also invite anyone else. The musicians we invite can upload their old music, and we will remaster their old music for free. And we'll give it back to them in that remastered in an MP3 file. And then they have the opportunity to sign up as musician recording artists on 528radio.com, 528records.com, excuse me. And from there, they'll get 60% royalty on anything that anyone donates. The entire project is a public service. It's all by donation, including the public library. From the playlists for the radio stations come from the public library. And so as a musician, you have an opportunity to participate in a far better arrangement than it would be if you were to go to, RCA or EMI or any of the multinational corporations. And so that's why the devil doers that are trying to discredit me says Horowitz wants to control the music of the world. Actually, it's more like Horowitz wants to free the music of the world back to the love frequency. And that's more like what's happening,
I hear you, man.
I think, yeah, and then you can go to our store. We're funded by wonderful people all over the world who appreciate what we're doing and love our products. I mentioned OxySilver. It's the first nutraceutical that actually is designed to be used with faithful prayer. We have a full money-back guarantee. If you don't get healthy after you use OxySilver, when you're first coming down with a cold or flu, that first inkling that you get, we guarantee if you take 3 capfuls of OxySilver with faithful prayer and say, I'm not going to get sick, I'm ousting this out of my body, I want my resonant energy to restore to balance and harmony and health, and you come down with sickness after that, we're going to give you your money back. We have very few takers. It is a fantastic product, and we know it is, and we basically support it by a full money-back refund if it doesn't work for anybody. We also have the website is cureshop.com. That's spelled CURESHOPPE, cureshop.com, as where people can get our books, tapes, DVDs, CDs, healthcare products, and equipment. And other than that, Greg, it's been a pleasure to join you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, you got it. Thank you as well. This has been a blast. So very much appreciated. Keep doing what you do out there, and we'll talk again sometime.
Look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Whoop, there it is, Higherside chatters and good people of the internet. Big thanks to Dr. Horowitz. He definitely got us through a lot of interesting stuff. I myself don't look through the same spiritual or religious lens that the good doctor does. That aspect really doesn't resonate with me, no pun intended. But to each their own.